do you want to spend 2 hours doing this? Well, no. Like, well, then you can learn how to do this in 2 minutes. With Salesforce, we're really lucky. We can custom most things, but it's so nice to have a customizable piece of kit that you can make a little bit more future-proof. You can get so far with the flow and you can get so far with an automation, but if you just added a little sprinkling of AI, you could save yourself a lot of time.
Welcome to Salesforce Radio, your destination for insights, news, and community connections within the dynamic Salesforce ecosystem. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Salesforce Radio. I'm here with Charlotte Perrill. She is the Senior Global Salesforce System Admin for Hertz. And just a bit of an introduction, Charlotte and I met very, very briefly at a conference just a couple months ago in London, where it was actually Salesforce App Exchange Live conference, which is a really nice conference. I've talked about it a little bit on this podcast so far because I met some other people there and I brought them on as guests. And later in the day, I actually got to hear Charlotte speaking on behalf of her company as well as Own Backup. So Charlotte, nice to meet you and excited for this. Thanks a lot for joining.
Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to see you again.
Absolutely. Always fun to meet people in person and then reconnect online. The last couple of years, I feel like it's been the opposite way, where I get to know people over Zoom and then I meet the person like, oh my gosh, you're taller, or, things like that. So this is always really fun to kind of catch up, but we don't know each other so well. So, just to get started, I'd love to hear a little bit about yourself and really about your journey kind of into the Salesforce space. And then we could talk a little bit about what you're doing currently and what other people should be doing or maybe want to be doing after they hear this podcast.
Things that give me indigestion on a regular basis. That's usually what people ask me, like, what freaks you out the most about other people's setups? I'm like, oh, I'll get to that later. But like most people, I fell into Salesforce accidentally. So I've been with Hertz for 14 years now, which is a very long old time. I started off in operations. So I kind of worked through the business from not the bottom to where I am now, but it's kind of the preferred journey. A little bit about the cars themselves, a little bit about the customer experience and so on and so forth. We implemented Salesforce for our usual B2B sales journey. So opportunities, contacts, things like that. And my predecessor from my original Salesforce role left. And my boss came up to me and said, "You're smart, work it out." I was like, okay, that's great. And so I became the sales lead for Salesforce internally, kind of supporting the international business. And that's everyone from, as you look at a map, Ireland to the right. So it's everyone who isn't North America and South America. And so I was looking after about 400 people across the globe for varying different things in corporate markets. And then my current predecessor, for want of a better phrase, decided she was going to retire. Miss Stephanie Rhodes retired from Hertz. And my current boss, Julie Cooner, came along and said, "Do you want to join my team?" And that's how I became a senior admin. I got my cert the December before I started, and I've been doing this as my full-time gig for nearly 2 years now. So it's been a lovely little journey into the Salesforce world, and I wouldn't change it for the world at all. It's been a great journey so far. I don't plan on leaving it behind. So that's how I got into Salesforce. It was literally by accident. You're smart, you figure it out. And then it turned into my full-time gig.
And that's usually the beginning of either a really good story or a really bad one. So I'm happy that we're on here having, the good side of the story. So just to back up a little bit. So when did Hertz go live with Salesforce originally?
Originally, it was just for B2B. It replaced something called Navigator. I don't know if any of your listeners have been in sales for 1,000 years like I have, but Navigator used to be the B2B contract mapping tool, and then it retired. So we've been using it for B2B since 2016, and then across other environments, probably 2020 onwards, during, I hate to say it, but during COVID and during lockdown, we moved all of our loyalty into Salesforce as well. So we now manage, as of today, it's nearly 3,000 odd users in our core environment, going from customer care, B2B, loyalty programs. It's everything. Everything except for marketing sits in this one little space.
Wow. So when Hertz implemented Salesforce, you had already been with Hertz for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, already many years. So you'd been in operations, and what were you doing in operations?
So my operations role, your audience spreads quite globally. So some of your listeners may know this. I used to work as an in-house, which is basically you're working for Hertz, but you're inside the customer's environment. And I used to work on the BBC desk. So I used to do all the car rental for the BBC, for a leasing company. So when you lease a vehicle, we would provide like a stopgap vehicle and things like that. So that's when you're waiting for your company car and you get given a hire car in between. So we used to do all of bookings, billing, customer fines, which was one of my favorite parts of my job, I must admit. Series of fines coming across my desk. That was always fun. And also their international rentals. So it wasn't just the UK. We were booking through all of our global markets. We are one of the few brands that are truly global. There are very few places we are not as a business. So helping folks on their international travels was also part of my job. Why can't I meet your car in Japan airport? This is on an island. So you might have to go inland and then pick up your car, that kind of thing.
Wow. So a lot of logistics, really out to the true sense of what operations is, right? I mean, operations very broad, but you were really in the trenches doing coordination and all of that kind of stuff. And so I assume that's probably a lot of picking up the phone, a lot of interfacing with people. And then all of a sudden you're basically inside of a system. I mean, it's a big transition.
It is. And for anyone who's done a similar journey, it's the volume. And I mean, literally decibel volume. You go from an environment that's quite, not shouty and aggressive way, but it's kind of, I need a car here, I need a car there, we need to do this, we need to do that. And it's constant noise. And then moving into a sales environment and into a system environment, that it's the volume of noise is low. Everyone is very chill and it's a lot smoother. It's my preferred environment. I'm a dyslexic person. So when there's times of quiet, I very much enjoy it.
Yeah, I absolutely can hear that. It's like, for me, it's like going from, working in an office to being remote, which I personally am maybe the opposite. I love the energy of people. I like being around people. I like bouncing ideas off people. Mm-hmm. But I've adapted, I think, over the years to this work from home model where I know how to interact with my colleagues, outside of work or inside of work through Slack, through Zoom. And it's different. It's a transition. But you get into Salesforce, and what was like the first things? Did you really just jump in, or did you do any training? Did anyone kind of hold your hand through the beginning there?
When we first went live in 2016, because I was an end user at the time, we had extensive training. We had even Salesforce trainers come in to the building and train the super users. It was the train the trainer model. So there was a small group of us. I think it was about 10 of us initially. And fortunately, we had a trainer who spoke multiple languages, so it didn't all fall on me to translate for everybody, which I was very, very grateful for. Because learning a new system, you need to translate the words in the correct language, in the correct formats. Because if you use the wrong word, it makes no sense. So I was like, yeah, that's great. That's perfect. So we had Salesforce come in and train us all. And then we were just not left to our own devices, because that sounds really horrible. But we just kind of made sure the system was working the way we needed it to. Any weird functionality we needed was kind of accommodated, which was wonderful. But when I moved into my sales specific role, I think I had 2 days with my predecessor, and then it was off you pop. See how you get on. So that was great. That was a lot of, not baptism of fire, but it was very interesting because I was an end user. I understood the pain points. So it was nice to have those quick wins already listed out to make adoption a little bit better. Because at the time it was, Salesforce is another tick box exercise. It's just admin, blah, blah, blah. No, it's not. It's really important. You need to do what I've asked you to do so we can be compliant, because Salesforce is a system of truth. So we're audited against it. So if your contract doesn't match what you've put in Salesforce, you're in trouble. So explaining that to them was really helpful. But moving into my current role, I think I had 2 weeks changeover with my predecessor, which was so valuable, so valuable. I learned all the little nuances, all the things that were, as she put it, the salt of the situation. You can't move on if you don't have what you need. So these are the salt of the day. Make sure those are done, and then move into everything else. So yeah, that's kind of training wise. And then all the trailhead bits and pieces, it fell in when I could. So I'm currently working on my my app builder just to get that done and out the way.
Oh, good. Yeah, it's hard always to find the time to actually get in and do Trailhead and to learn more, even just to read up on things, especially when you're spending so much time inside the system. And I was wondering, like, you mentioned kind of this dialogue between you and these kind of users in the beginning. Was there a turning point for you? Was there a point where you were like, I'm sold on this system? Was it through seeing like the complexities and some of the issues as a user in the beginning that you started to believe, hey, there could be something really good in this? Or, what was that like? Like, was there a mind shift there?
There was totally a mind shift. Totally. I'd been doing something by hand for, I don't know, probably a year, 2 years, because that's the way it gets done. And all businesses have these processes that just they just exist. And I like to use an example that my boss shares. And just because we've always run around the table 3 times at the beginning of the meeting doesn't mean we should always run around the table 3 times at the start of a meeting. So it is time for a change. It is time to move things forward. And I noticed I think it was a report function out of Salesforce that was going to save me hours throughout the month when I was doing this process manually. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to see if anyone notices that I've automated this and see if anyone says anything. And nobody did. So as new people joined the environment, as new team members came on, I was training them to do it the automated way. And it was saving us hours of time. And then people kind of were like, oh, you can save time. You can do this. You can do that. And yes, you can. You can make all these fancy things. So let's spend the time. Let's do requirements. Let's see what we can push through. And it turned into a happy little environment of just sales folks at the time. And they still seem to be using it well today. Some of my reports still exist and still are automated, and they still use them.
Wow. So it sounds like the first thing that you really built in Salesforce was a report, which is cool. And I think one of the reasons I like that a lot is because a lot of times, the value that an organization might be getting out of Salesforce is for the shareholders, for the board, because of the reporting mechanisms. And that's who's using that. But when you all of a sudden start seeing that we can empower the end users by creating better reports, by doing things like that and automating those tasks, I mean, it's a huge leap, right? It's really a big deal where we can all of a sudden have this kind of different experience. And just like to my question before, you've now, turned over to the other side where you're like, oh, this system actually can make my life better. It actually can make things, easier. It can automate things. And I love that the way that you did that with the new employees and you kind of brought them into the fold, so to speak, and converted them right away to realize the value in the system, which is a great story for Hertz. It's also a great story for Salesforce because it doesn't always happen like that, right? You don't always get adoption, and then you don't always see users reaping the benefits of using the system. And it all comes down to obviously implementation, but also like evangelism, inside the organization. So it's cool how you just kind of fell into that role.
It is totally by accident. And I remember saying to a colleague, do you want to spend 2 hours doing this? Well, no. Like, well, then you can learn how to do this in 2 minutes. I don't want to spend 2 hours doing this thing every single month. I always say it, the best ideas come from laziness. I don't want to spend the time doing it, so I'm going to get something else that does it for me so I can do something else. There are parts of my job that are far more exciting than building this thing by hand every month for a customer to look at when I can just press 2-3 buttons and it gets sent to me and then sent to the customer. So why not make life easier for everybody? There are far more important things that we could be doing.
Absolutely. And just in my experience as a salesperson who's selling software, which should make Salesforce easier because it allows for more interaction from customers, from partners, from whoever's outside the system through forms. And that's not to say that it can't also help internal users because we have tools for that. I might have mentioned it on here before, a story where I was on a call talking about a form solution that an organization was using in the US, pretty big organization. And they start telling me a little bit about pain points. Hey, it's tough. The validation, sometimes we've failed submissions, all of these kind of things that hey, it comes along with these type of softwares, it comes along with these type of use cases. And especially when you're interacting with a very diverse group of individuals who are putting information into your system, volunteers, I think they were signing up at their different locations. And there was one guy on the call, and they name his name and they say, and every Friday before he leaves the office, he goes through the entire submission log of all the failed submissions, and he manually gets that all into Salesforce. And I was like, as a salesperson, one of the things I'm trained to do is to find what's going to motivate someone to make a change. And I was like, unless they have no pity for their colleague who sits every Friday before he gets to leave the office, I was imagining him like trying to get out of the office. And then he's like, oh, I have to, go through my submission log of failed submissions. And that's the kind of stuff that we're trying to avoid with good implementations, good software, good data. But, we all know that it's still a problem for a lot of people, whether they've been on Salesforce for a month or 75 months. There's things that are not making their users' lives easier. And maybe the users don't say anything. Maybe the admins don't say anything. What do you do in your organization now to improve things? Like what is there a help desk? Is there a ticketing system for internal users, or are you like looking to see how to make those experiences better?
So it's kind of a twofold thing. We do have kind of our ticketing system, which is I have a problem, we'd like to make this change to this, that kind of thing. I think it helps that we have this sounds really terrible. It's the only way I can kind of put it. We have quite a high profile team. We are part of the CRM team. If you have a problem with the CRM, you tell us, doesn't matter what it is. It can be, I don't like where this button is, all the way through to, I have a big problem because I can't do a thing. Whatever it is, you tell us, and we try and find a way forward. It can be the smallest thing. Like I said, that button location, or in the drop down, we would like it ordered differently by priority as opposed to alphabetically. If you have that open dialogue with your end users and a way to either bring the information to your CRM team or just kind of have those active touch points, that's how you get people using the system. If you just leave them to gripe about it in the background, they're just going to say the system that the business has implemented is rubbish. But it's because no one's heard them. No one's listened to them. I'm quite fortunate because I have been with the business a long time. I do know a lot of people, and I do tend to pop into people's chats and say, hey, I've noticed that something's been going on. What's the deal? How annoyed are you, and how quickly do you want me to get it fixed? So there's that back and forth. And our business unit heads across the different sectors within our core environment are also very vocal, which we love. I've got a problem. I want to be able to do this, which is great because then we know what they're trying to do. If people don't tell us, my crystal ball is broken. I cannot read your mind. So if you don't tell me, I can't fix it. And I think that's like the main message that as an admin I send out. If you tell me it's broken, I will fix it. If you say I don't like it, I will do my best to accommodate everybody. If you tell me, we can do something. If you don't tell me, I'm going to think you're fine.
Yeah, I think it's really key. And obviously you coming from the business, knowing about what people are doing on a day-to-day basis makes things much, much easier. So catch me up a little bit. You touched on it a little, but tell us about your current role and like what your daily life looks like there.
No day is the same. I'm a sucker for routine though. So I've made certain routines throughout my week. So like you said at the top, I'm one of the senior global system admins for Salesforce within Hertz. I now look after 3,000 odd folks on a day-to-day basis. That's their access, that's their provisioning, making sure they can see what they need to see to do their day-to-day job. But it's not just that. I consider myself the admin's admin, and it's kind of my little tagline that's kind of developed throughout my time with Salesforce. I look after everything from provisioning all the way to security, to data management, to cert management, to the health score, everything from top to bottom. I've got my hand everywhere. If I don't like the score on the health check, Jira cards get created and we move forward. We like to have a nice, healthy score. But it's not just across our core environment. I also look after Ask HR and I look after our marketing cloud. Day-to-day can be users to provision followed by checkups across the business, or it can look like a carryover from the previous day, a problem or a situation and things like that. So I do have my hands everywhere. And I'm sure it's infuriating to everybody, but I do take an active interest in lots of different parts of the business because I've been here so long. And I have friends who are like, can you just? I'm like, yeah, sure, honey, I can take a look at that for you. So I spend a lot of my time relaying information from the business back to the team. I also spend a lot of my time on meetings saying that's not how they do it in international, because I used to work for the international part of the business. I speak on behalf of all of our corporate international markets, and to remind the US, because it's a US business, that's what happens. We don't have states in the UK or in New Zealand. That's not how postcodes look over here. That's not the driving license format. And it's not for me being negative. It's so that we have user adoption, because if we're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, the data is going to be no good. So there has to be a little bit of wiggle room. But that is really my day to day. I spend a lot of time reviewing people's permission sets, making sure that they don't have too much access when they shouldn't. We're currently onboarding a new business sector, so I'm spending a lot of time with them, making sure they're trained, making sure they're okay, making sure everything's working. But that's basically my day to day. Wake up, Salesforce, look at all the dashboards, make sure everyone's okay, continue throughout my day.
Wow. And I'm sure when you started out at Hertz, you have no idea what you were getting into in terms of getting involved in the whole system. That's an ecosystem that's much bigger than it appears to be when you first kind of log in for your first time or do Trailhead.
When I started Hertz, I was only meant to be here 6 months as a maternity leave temp.
Wow.
And I've been here 14 years now. So
the best kind of stories. I love that. Wow. And yeah, so just in terms of your team and the resources that you have, tell us a little bit about, I mean, it's a big corporation. There's, we all know how that works. There's different teams, there's different budgets, there's IT, there's operations, there's HR, there's all these different things. Then there's Salesforce. Where does Salesforce kind of sit within the organization as a whole? And what does your team look like? And who are the people that you work with?
So at the moment, we kind of sit in the tech and product umbrella. So we are a piece of tech, we are a piece of product. So we also support product. So we kind of sit in this little limbo where we cover a lot of bases. It's like a kind of small umbrella of folks. My day-to-day I spend interacting predominantly with my fellow senior system admin, and she predominantly looks after like the loyalty side of things. And she has also been with the business for a gajillion years. So between us, we know everybody. It's great. And then I spend a lot of time with our PMs, our product managers. So they support people in business, like sales, care, marketing. And then I spend a lot of my time with senior team, going over their expectations, kind of what needs to go out in the release and things like that, as part of an additional thing that I've picked up because I'm nosy and I like to see what's going on. I support the release closure after release day. So making sure business have confirmed, making sure everything's working, making sure that we can close out in a timely fashion. That's really the folks that I interact with. Our team is not enormous. We are a very close, tight-knit team. We all support each other. We have training from each other, and it's great. It really is. We have some wonderful developers. They are insanely talented. What they don't know about Salesforce isn't worth knowing. Also, our senior architect we love Marlene, and I love the whole team. They are amazing. And we have some seasoned Salesforce veterans in our midst. So I think Marlene has like 10 certs, 15 certs. One of our other senior team, Brian, he also has a similar amount. Our devs are all highly trained and highly decorated, for want of a better phrase. So we are a very knowledgeable team.
It's always fun to work with people who you feel you can learn a lot from, but also people you can just rely on for all of these different things, especially in Salesforce. Just people who can see the big picture. I always have appreciated that from a lot of the colleagues that I've worked with, here at Titan, who just, it's like they were born into Salesforce, right? It's like that's where they came from, the magical land of Salesforce, which, you can't really feel or touch, but you can kind of be, enveloped in a certain sense. And it's really nice to have those kind of colleagues that just feel like they know so much and they get that big picture. It's like, how did they get here? And how did we get here? How did I get to work with these people?
Exactly.
It's just really cool.
And they're incredible because they're a phrase that I like to use. They're not information holders. They don't hold information hostage away from you. Like, oh, you want to learn how to do this thing to make your life easier and my day easier? Here's how you do it. So we have that open dialogue. So there's always active training to move everybody forward, because at the end of the day, we've all got one pair of hands and only so many hours in the day. So if someone wants to help you out doing something, or you think someone can support you with something else, you just share that information. And it's incredible. It's such an open environment, and we do have such open dialogue. Like most businesses, we have kind of story pointing at a certain point in the week to go over what needs to go out, what's being developed and what isn't. And we have that open dialogue of, I'll show you how to do blah, blah, blah. If someone can take this on, I can take this on. So it's very transparent, which is so lovely, because I've been in teams, I'm sure we all have, where it's, I do this job, but if they're off for a week, what are you going to do? So it's a very open dialogue.
Exactly. Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. And what if some of the what are some of the milestones, I feel like, of the implementations you've done up until this point? What are some of the biggest projects you've worked on?
Definitely our archiving strategy. That has been one of my favorite things to work with. You saw my talk at App Exchange. I've done the same talk at Dreamforce. I think I had my logons for OWN for about a week, 2 weeks, and then we had an archiving policy that got a little bit overexcited. So working out those new policies, making sure all 600,000 records were brought back in a timely fashion. That has been, it doesn't sound like a project, but the knock-on effects from that have been turned into a project and are now part of my daily life. I make sure all the archiving policies are running, making sure we're not going over storage, making sure everything's moving as it should be. And it's really valuable and important. I find it business facing as well, because they need their data, they need their information, but we also need to archive it and make sure we can actually do what we need to do. Because you know what it's like, web to case creates a case, which creates some data, which means it has to roll out at some point after it's been resolved. And I find that fascinating. I have that kind of puzzle brain. I like a little puzzle. I like a little query a little maths problem that's going to make everybody's life a little bit easier. So that's something I love. And as with most businesses, digital transformation, we're making things easier for our care agents, which will be easier to support our customers and things like that. So those are always ongoing projects, and they're some of my favorite to do. They're so time consuming though. I love them, but it's like, I'm halfway through something and it's 5. I'll just keep going.
Oh my gosh. I know. Like we were just saying before we started recording, it's those weeks where it's just one thing after another. And then you're like, where did the time go? I do not understand. And you've got your priorities, but maybe they got, fell to the wayside because of all the emergencies that come out. You have to put out fires. And that's how it goes when, you're in that kind of agile environment, which sounds like really you are. It sounds like even though you're in kind of what would be considered a pretty large organization, there's movement, there's things happening. You're not getting stuck in planning for projects for exorbitant amounts of time. And I think that's really, it's nice to hear, at least from the perspective of someone who's working in a tech company, right? It's a very different environment where everything tries to move fast all the time. And there's no expectation that anything's going to ever be slow.
It's nice to move some things move at a really quick pace. Some things are just unavoidable. You need to go from 0 to 100 and that's fine. Some days are like that. And then there's some projects that you dance around for quite a while because you know that you need to do this project, but there's also 6 other things that it's dependent on. So if you can't do the 6 things, you can't do the project. And then someone doesn't like the 6 things because legal have decided that they don't like something and you have to go back. But some projects are like that, and that's fine. That's the nature of the business.
Absolutely. And so what are some of the things that you have coming up in the near future or distant future? What's on the roadmap for you guys?
Roadmap for us at the moment, it's just the continual digital transformation, making sure that our care agents in the call centers and at the desk have everything they need. It's continuous improvement. With Salesforce, we're really lucky. We can custom most things. And we have, like most big businesses, I like to say we've Hertzed it because it was very much a custom environment. And my other half, he works for a completely different sector, a completely different thing. They use Salesforce, and he happened to peek over my shoulder. Like, you know what it's like working from home. Sometimes people come in and out, and he went, "That's not Salesforce." I'm like, "Oh yeah, it is. Yeah, it's bright yellow and we love it because that's our branding." If I look at his environment, it's entirely different. They're still using Classic. I'm just saying. Not that I'm judging, but he's still using Classic. So, but it's so nice to have a customizable piece of kit but you can make a little bit more future-proof. We know that AI is important, and be it one version or another, we know that chatbots are important. We know all these things are important. And we're building, like all businesses, we're building those blocks to make sure we can actually do business in that fashion in the future, which is great. It means I get to play with things.
Yeah. And I think, as someone who talks to businesses of all shapes and sizes, and I really mean that, from small nonprofits to large, multinational corporations, I think for some of the smaller organizations, the ability to create in Salesforce a look and feel that will actually improve the, day-to-day of the users. And let's just talk about feel, right? Like you're saying, like going into the org and seeing your company's colors, which is not a very difficult thing to implement, but can really make a big difference. And I have one instance in mind that I happened to peek over someone's shoulder and see someone that I know who works for a large company. And it really was like that. It was like, whoa, oh my gosh, that's Salesforce. And that's where you can take things, right? That's what you can do when you have resources, when you have the vision, and when you have a roadmap and you want to actually provide these. And he was explaining to me, like, for him, he feels like he lives in Salesforce. Like he's like, this is my tool that I use to do my job. Like, it's Salesforce. He had a few others that he also uses, but he started showing me in his org, like the different things that he has there and the different ways he can calculate things and the different ways he can. And it was really eye-opening, because as someone who had been using Salesforce for a long time and also selling a solution that's helping users use Salesforce, but also helping people outside of Salesforce interact with Salesforce, it was cool to see where you could really take things, right? And what those limitations are. And, I'd love to see some of the kind of smaller organizations that are using Salesforce create that same look and feel, where it's a little bit more homey inside of the system. And it's cool to hear that that's something that you kind of have pride in at Hertz.
Definitely. There's a phrase that I used to throw around in my previous role. It's your coffee system. You sit down at your desk, you've got your coffee, you turn on your emails, you turn on your Teams, and then you turn on Salesforce. These are your top things that you need to be doing first thing. That it should be your source of everything. That's where you should be. And it's true for a lot of our end users. Care, yes, 100%. Sales, I can't guarantee it every day. I can't guarantee they're going to be straight in their dashboards looking at where things should be, are, and kind of moving things through, because that's not how sales work. At the end of the day, for some environments, that B2B needs to take a break. But with Care, it is emails, chat, Salesforce. That's how their day starts, and that's how their day goes. They are in it all day. They get annoyed if they've been doing something else for a few minutes and it locks them out. But that's the security feature that we have turned on, because it is system of truth. You can't just walk away from it for 10 minutes. You have to keep using it. That's the policy. And it's so important, because that's the thing I get asked about the most. Can you extend the time? No, I can't. I'd love to. No. And it's things like that. But it's good to know that they're using it, and that's a frustration point for them. I'd rather them be frustrated with that than it not working. Like, I can put
Absolutely.
I can put up with a little slow run time sometimes, because that's not always our fault.
Right.
If it's logging you out because you went for a coffee and came back, I'm happy with that, because you wanted to be back in it. But I'm not happy that you didn't close it down before you went off.
Relying on the safeguards. Yeah.
Exactly. Like, just close it. Just please. I'm not asking for anything complicated.
So I'd love to dig into that a little bit more. Tell me about, taking this care role. What do they see in Salesforce? Like, what is the home screen look like for them? What are you trying to, or what are you pushing them to be doing when they log into Salesforce? And what are some of the main things that they do there?
It's totally different per user group, totally different. So our user groups stretch from sales to security to finance to care to additional services, people who don't need to be in it all the time, but should be in it quite a bit. So it really does depend. We've moved things around in the App Center, where you're kind of pointed towards your org, pointed towards your part of the environment directly. So sales will always see sales at the top. care will always see care at the top because they shouldn't be playing with anything else. So they should be straight into their care environment. And it does depend if they're working on cases that day, if they're answering the phones, if they're working with Omni, if they're working with a specialized customer that day. It purely depends what they've been put on, what queues they're in. For sales, when they log in, they see like this, I don't want to call it the standard home screen because we have updated it. There are what you've got pending approval, what tasks that you are meant to be doing that day should you have been allocated a contract to review, revenue for this month, what they should be doing, what needs to be looked at, any upcoming appointments, because we have Salesforce Inbox. So that's a good tool that they use. And they are always a quick link to a dashboard that says, this is where you're at, this is where you should be at. So yeah, that's mainly what we point people towards. And security, I'm not saying they have free reign of the system, but we do, like with every organization, we have folks in security. They need to be able to see a lot of things. So we make sure they can see all the things they need to see. And if they can't, I get poked because one of our heads of security is in the office that I'm normally in. And I get a little wander over to my desk. Hi, Charlotte. Can't see a thing. Okay, we'll make a thing happen. Thank you. So it's that. But we have completely customized it. It's completely bespoke to your business unit, making sure that you can get into where you need to be.
And are there business units that are still not on Salesforce, or everyone's basically on Salesforce that you know about?
Everyone who needs to be in Salesforce is in Salesforce. That's for sure. Because I get requests for access all day, every day. And I'm not saying they're heavily policed.
Right.
The type of access they require is heavily policed. Our approval process is very robust, and myself and my boss are final call. When it gets to us, everyone who should have decided they didn't want something should have done it. And if they haven't, I'm quite happy to press that reject button. I don't get to do it very often. When I do, it's the best. I'm like, sorry, you can't have system admin access. Goodbye. You don't know what that means. Go away.
Right. Well, I like the point about security coming and saying, hey, we need, something, because it just goes to show you that there's something that they need there that they don't have access to. Wow. Like they didn't have to start, pulling papers out of the old drawer, dig something up. They have a faith that information should be there and probably is there. So they're coming to you to get access to that, which I think speaks volumes about obviously the level of competence that the org must have at this point, which is, really nice to hear.
It is really lovely. I could do without the bruise that I've got on my shoulder for the amount of time it costs me, but it's things like, we had I don't want to call it a situation because it sounds quite grand and it's not, but we had something come up the other day. One of our heads of security wanted to be able to search on a particular criteria and that criteria only. But the search criteria that we have is pinned to 3 points. But sometimes if you work in security, you've only got 1 point of search criteria. So we're looking at a way to remove 2 points for this user group. So they can search by, I only have this, and it's this much, and it's been given to me by law enforcement or legal or something. And it is important because they see Salesforce as the system of truth. So they want to be able to search by that criteria. So it's completely invaluable to most departments, which I love.
Absolutely. I think that's really, it just sounds like there's a certain cohesion. And that's really nice to hear coming from someone who's, as I said before, in the trenches, in the system, looking at all the different parts and working with the different people involved. Yeah, I mean, before, we wrap up, what are some of your thoughts about where we're at right now with Salesforce, some of the developments from this year? You said you were at Dreamforce this year, so you got to hear a lot of the hype around what this year is going to look like. But it's always fun to check in, already 6, 7, 8 months later and say, hey, where are we at? What's going on? And what does the rest of the year going to look like for us people who live inside of this Salesforce ecosystem?
Yeah, I'm quite excited for the move into AI and the way that we can use generative AI as Salesforce users, not necessarily as a person who works for Hertz. This is just something that I am interested in. Also, as like I said earlier, I'm dyslexic. I find it so interesting how AI can learn from us. But is it going to correct me as a dyslexic person, or is it going to learn my idiosyncrasies? So to me, I find that highly interesting. I cannot wait to play with that in Sandbox to see how it learns, whether it learns from me or learns from external sources or will correct itself. I also speak quite a few languages, so teaching it in different languages and things like that, I do find that fascinating because I'm terrible for it. My mum is French Italian, so we kind of switch between like 3 languages between us, and it's quite funny to watch. But will a bot learn in a similar fashion? So I love putting things through the ringer in that regard. I'm really looking forward to those kind of enhancements and seeing what we can do with it.
Amazing. Yeah, it is exciting. And I feel like, I had this talk just yesterday with Mark Good, who was on the podcast, who's from AI Force Training. Mm-hmm. And we were kind of talking about how, there was this initial kind of jump on the scene from ChatGPT where it kind of all of a sudden was exposed to the masses, and the hype has died down a lot now, I think, at this point, at least on the large scale. Yeah. But what we're seeing now is that people are starting to internalize and understand and take in-house some of these new tools we have and starting to really play around and see, where they're going to come into our lives within Salesforce, outside of Salesforce, all over. And obviously everywhere, every different type of conversation you have about AI, it's very different, right? If we're talking about AI in Salesforce, it's very different than AI, as political, predicting or in government, all that stuff. It's such different conversations. And we're starting to get that nuance, which I think is kind of cool.
It is really good fun. I love speaking to my friends who aren't in the tech space. They aren't part of the constant dialogue about AI and like ChatGPT and things like that, to hear their perspective, because you either get the machines are going to take over,
right?
Or, she says with skeptical face, it drives me mad. I have one particular friend and I'm just like, love, it's not. I promise it's not. It's not that advanced. All the way through to, do you think it'll ever be able to control my washing machine? So it's things like that. It's very interesting to watch folks outside of the space, or folks that just use Salesforce as the tool in their day-to-day.
Right.
How is it going to help me? It's very inwardly focused. How is it going to make my life easier? How is it going to make my job easier? How is it going to take away parts of my day that are not necessarily things that I need to be doing? So I'm really fascinated by that. I'd love to, as a personal little thing, I'd love to kind of integrate AI with a flow process that can make changes to approvals. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of thing that I'm really interested in. If it can take into consideration like a wide set of parameters and approve itself or reject itself based on the parameters, that I'm that kind of dork. I love that kind of thing. Because my background was sales, I always think that part of Salesforce is very fascinating, because you can get so far with the flow and you can get so far with an automation, but if you just added a little sprinkling of AI, you could save yourself a lot of time.
That's exactly what I was thinking about after that conversation, and different ways where we could just improve things a little bit, and take out one step, mm-hmm. right? Or do one thing a little bit better, or with more accuracy, or with just more data, right? I mean, that's really the idea, to be able to look at a much bigger data set than, I can cover in an hour, 10 hours a week, right? I can't consume as much data as the computer, as the AI.
We'll just let it do it. And it's one of those things you can kind of set it and let it run.
Right.
Which I love. I love leaving things to think about themselves. I've worked with a couple of data sets independently. I love D&D. I love kind of tabletop RPGs. So I'll load a certain set of criteria into ChatGPT or whatever I've got my hands on that day and just let it kind of roll out the scenario. And it's so fascinating to kind of see where you end up as a person or a character, or the people that you're playing with, versus what the AI has binned out and you think, no, that's not what happened. But it's interesting and it's fascinating. I love it.
That's really cool. I love that. Oh, that sounds like that's like just a really cool thing to try out and to play around with.
It's so much fun. I'm a Call of Cthulhu fan, the full tabletop RPG, and I love it. It's my favorite. I listened to a specific podcast about it, and I've rolled out their scenarios in ChatGPT and sent them to them. That's just weird, but it's so cool. I'm really sorry, but this is the kind of audience that you have. We're very nerdy. We like to do these things. This is a scenario that you could play.
That's so cool. So yeah, before we wrap up, just any, I guess, words of advice for people who are listening to this and thinking, hey, how can I further myself in what I'm doing within the Salesforce ecosystem?
Biggest advice is to join your local community, particularly for new people to join the space. All communities are welcome. All communities are very welcoming. They are very beautiful communities that are available either online or in person. To have that camaraderie within the groups is just amazing. And you can discuss kind of your cert maintenance, which is really important. We have to all do our cert maintenance. It's one of those things. I hope everyone met the deadline already. The new one has just come out, so please don't forget to do it. And it's really valuable to have those discussions with people face to face, because you can kind of find new routes or support on how to best do your certs and things like that. I'm really lucky. My mentor is internal to Hertz, but I also recommend finding a mentor within your community. Should you be able to find the right community for you, it's really good to reach out to someone and say, I'd love you to be my mentor to kind of support my growth and give guidance. As long as you have a good goal in mind, I want to get here, then they'll be able to support you. If you're an active admin, please back up your data. Pretty please. It doesn't matter what backup solution you are using. I will always recommend Own. They are one of the best. They're the one we use at Hertz, and they are absolutely wonderful. The service is amazing. The product is amazing. But please back up your data. Just because other people have data losses doesn't mean you won't. So that's my main advice to folks. And just enjoy Salesforce for what it is. It's a wonderful environment. Trailhead is amazing. It's a beautiful space to work in, and enjoy it for what it is.
Well, Charlotte, I think we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining us at Salesforce Radio. This has been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to getting together some time again in the future.
Awesome, fabulous. Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Salesforce Radio. Don't forget to subscribe for more exciting discussions, expert tips, and exclusive interviews with industry leaders. Stay connected with Titan, plus the power of the planet's leading CRM. See you next time.